about stories in the context of telling a story, but we're talking now about hearing a story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And
So might not follow all the elements.
a number of those elements may be absent, but we can infer the results. So we'll give some examples. We'll give some examples of those kind of shortened abbreviations of stories that are still stories, but they don't necessarily come out that way in the interview. Let me give you, it's a wonderful Kurt Vonnegut description of 3 of the most popular stories in the world. These are the 3 you need, and delivers them to you in a very interesting way.
Has created a body of work of startling eccentricity and universal appeal. His singular view of the world applies not just to his stories and characters, but to some of his theories as well.
Well, there's no reason why the simple shapes of story can't be fed into computers. They are beautiful shapes. This is the GI axis, good fortune, ill fortune. Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now this is an exercise in relativity, really. It's the shape of the curves of what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average. Is why get a depressing person. We'll start the whole thing we call this story Man in a Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's a good way to remember it. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it. Not copyrighted. Another story is also a beautiful curve and easily fed into a computer. It's called Boy Gets Girl, but it needn't be that. Just a way to remember it. Start on an average day, average person, not expecting anything to happen a day like any other. Find something wonderful. Just love it. Oh, God damn it. Got it back again. People like that. Now, these are beautiful curves, and this gets a little complicated. Computers can now play chess, so I don't know why they can't digest this very difficult curve I'm going to draw for you now. And it so happens that this is the most popular story in our civilization, Western civilization. And we love to hear this story. Every time it's retold, somebody makes another $1 million. You're welcome to do it. Now, surprisingly enough, I said it's depressing. You know, people don't like stories about below average days and people. But we're going to start way down here. Worse than that, who is so low? It's a little girl. What's happened? Her mother has died. Her father has remarried a vile-tempered, ugly woman with 2 nasty daughters, big daughters. You've heard it. Anyway, there's a party at the palace that night. She can't go. She has to help everybody else get ready. She has to stay home. Not that she thinks lower, no. She's a staunch little girl, and she has had the maximum whack from fate, which is the loss of her mother. She can't go any lower than that. Okay, so the fairy godmother comes. Gives her shoes, gives her stockings, gives her... gives her means of transportation. Goes to the party. Dances with the prince, has a swell time. Boring, 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 boring. Now there's a slight inclination to that line as I've drawn it because it takes perhaps 20 seconds, 30 seconds for her grandfather's clock to start 12. Does she wind up at the same level? Of course not. She will remember that dance for the rest of her life. Now, she poops along on this level till the prince comes to shoe fence. She achieves off-scale
Okay, so little way to think about the stories you're hearing and the patterns and all the relations to how we depart from norms and return to norms. Lovely. So what are some things we want you to find out that are really useful? Contradictions. Contradictions are enormously useful for us because it's typically when people say one thing and they do another. Remember the birthday, right? Where the little kids were talking about things that weren't there. Well, another version of that. If you ask people how much television they watch, they typically will give you a number like, oh, maybe an hour or so a week, right? We know for very strong that the average television viewing in the U.S. is roughly, on average, I believe it's 6 hours a night. So the idea that you're saying 1 hour a week, boy, I wonder if you're underreporting. Well, there's another version of this in some work we did where we asked parents, did they let their kids watch violent things on television? And they went, oh, absolutely not. No way. I'm totally opposed to violence, and we don't let our kids watch any of this. So then we hung out with the kids, and we watched what they watched. And like, whoa, there was some really violent stuff going on, right? All the Roadrunner things, and people being smashed, and like, so what do we do? The parents said they didn't, but the kids do. Are they like not informed? Are the kids... So then we found out that what in fact the parents meant wasn't that they excluded all violent things. That for them, right, there were television shows and films that gave their kids nightmares, and there were ones that didn't. And in their minds, the nightmare shows were the ones that they really needed to protect them from. The others, Roadrunner, it was violent. We thought it was violent, but it doesn't get inside them. And that was a metric that I don't think the film boards quite understand, right? There's a nightmare scale that you need to be sensitive to. Point being, when we initially asked the question, we had a contradiction and we needed to figure out, how does that make sense? You've just told me something that I don't get. Okay, so contradictions and figuring out how has somebody sorted out this seeming contradiction. So those are really useful. This notion of normatives. And norms, they're all around us. There's the water we're in. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, when you said the parents revealed that it was this nightmare scale, did you go ask those parents again? Like, did you put this contradiction in front of them and then ask them?
We carefully, because one of the things you don't want to do is say, well, you lied to us. Your kids are watching all kinds of nasty crap. Why did you tell us that? Right? You can't do that. So, in looking at these shows, we asked them, could you help us with a scale of what you mean by violence? And then they pick certain shows, and then because it wasn't on top of their heads about nightmares, right? The nightmare was something they just kind of internalized, and we were basically saying, well, why is this show okay and this one not? And they go, oh, I know. And then we got to it. So again, you need to be accepting of what they're telling you, not challenging. Even though Louis Theroux was able to challenge, that's sort of an advanced technique, we want to kind of embrace them and say, accept what you say, help us understand it. So, normatives. And we talked about understanding the norm. When we say there's a departure in a story, often we don't really know what the norm is. We take it for granted. So, understanding what we mean by a norm is. Because often, we want to push against norms. Norms don't always work. And when we use the term workaround, workarounds are the techniques and things we do when the cultural norms are at odds. And we kind of have to get around them without explicitly saying we're getting around them. So we really want to know these things called norms. And we did some work looking at washing out